Crash! The sound of shattering glass echoed through the elegant lobby of the Grand Manhattan Hotel as Madison Parker tried to balance 3 champagne trays. At 25, working as a waitress to pay for journalism school, she definitely didn't expect her Friday night to end with her covered in expensive drinks in front of New York's most powerful businessmen. Darn, 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 she muttered, crouching down to collect the shards. That's when a strong hand pulled her up with such force that she was thrown directly against a solid masculine chest. By instinct, her arms wrapped around his neck, and before she could process what was happening, camera flashes exploded around them. "What the heck?" she began to say, but the deep, irritated voice interrupted her. Perfect. Simply perfect. Madison looked up and found herself face to face with the most handsome face she'd ever seen in her life. Perfectly styled dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a jaw that seemed to have been sculpted by Michelangelo. It was also the most irritated face she'd ever seen. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't?" Madison stammered, still trapped in his arms while the flashes continued. "I'm Connor Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Enterprises. And you," he said, tightening his grip on her waist, "just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Hey, you're the one who pulled me." "Connor! Connor!" the reporters shouted. "Who is she? Is she your new girlfriend? When did you start dating?" Connor closed his eyes, clearly calculating something. When he opened them again, there was something dangerous in his gaze. "You want a story?" he said loud enough for everyone to hear, pulling Madison even closer. "Here's your story." And then, in front of 30 reporters, 15 cameras, and what seemed to be half of Manhattan's elite, Connor Mitchell lowered his head and whispered in Madison's ear, "Smile like your life depends on it, because now it will." "What do you mean by—" "Gentlemen of the press," Connor announced, his voice echoing through the lobby. "I'd like to introduce my fiancée, Madison Parker. We'll be married next month." Madison's world stopped. "What? Fiancée? But I don't even know your full name," she whispered desperately. "Now you do," he murmured back, still smiling at the cameras. "And you have exactly 5 seconds to decide. Either you play the role of the most in-love woman in the world, or I guarantee you'll never work in Manhattan again." Madison looked around. Flashes, smiles, questions being shouted. And this impossible man who had apparently just decided she would be his wife because she had accidentally embraced him. "You're completely insane," she whispered. "Probably," he admitted. "So, what's it going to be, darling?" Madison took a deep breath. Okay, he wanted a show. She'd give him a show. Rising on her tiptoes, she planted a resounding kiss on his cheek and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "I love you so much, love of my life. I can't wait to be Mrs. Mitchell." The crowd exploded in applause, and Connor looked at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "Very good," he murmured. "Very good indeed." As they were surrounded by reporters and paparazzi, Madison had a single, terrifying realization. Her normal life had just ended. And all because of an accidental embrace with the most arrogant man in New York. But why, deep in her chest, did she feel a small spark of excitement? "Oh, and Madison?" Connor whispered as they posed for more photos. "Yes? Welcome to the Mitchell family. I hope you're prepared because my life isn't exactly simple." As if in response to his words, an elegant woman with gray hair approached, clearly furious. "Connor William Mitchell," she practically roared. "What on earth is happening here?" Connor sighed. "Madison, meet my mother, Eleanor Mitchell. Mother, my fiancée." Eleanor Mitchell looked Madison up and down as if she were a particularly disgusting insect. "We're going to talk now," she said coldly. And Madison realized that the accidental embrace was just the beginning of a much, much bigger madness. The Mitchell family penthouse was like stepping into a magazine spread, if that magazine was Rich People Who Could Crush You Without Blinking Weekly. Madison sat on a leather couch that probably cost more than her annual tuition, trying not to touch anything while Connor paced like a caged panther. 30 minutes, Eleanor Mitchell announced, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. 30 minutes since your little performance. And we already have 12 news articles, 47 social media posts, and 3 marriage proposals from other billionaires' daughters thinking they can steal Connor away. Mother, Connor began. Don't mother me, young man. Eleanor's voice could have frozen champagne. You've been dodging marriage arrangements for 3 years, and now you announce an engagement to me, Madison finished, standing up. Madison Parker. And I'm sitting right here, Mrs. Mitchell. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. Oh, it speaks. Mother, please. Connor rubbed his temples. Madison, ignore her. She's just concerned that my son has lost his mind, Eleanor interrupted. Connor, darling, you're supposed to marry Victoria Ashworth next month. Her father owns half of Manhattan's real estate. This little stunt has complicated things considerably. Madison's jaw dropped. Wait, what? You're already engaged? Was, Connor said quickly. It was more of a business arrangement. Business arrangement? Madison's voice pitched higher. You mean like buying stocks or office supplies? Something like that, Connor muttered. Before Madison could fully process this bombshell, the penthouse door burst open, and in walked what could only be described as a tornado in a 3-piece suit. Connor! The tornado shouted. What in the name of all that's expensive have you done now? Madison, Connor said tiredly. Meet my younger brother, Blake. Blake, this is Madison, my fiancé. Blake Mitchell stopped mid-stride, his perfectly coiffed hair slightly disheveled from his dramatic entrance. He looked exactly like Connor, but with a mischievous grin that suggested he'd never met a prank he didn't like. Holy guacamole, Blake said, circling Madison like she was a sculpture in a museum. You're real. I thought the news was just another one of Connor's elaborate tax write-offs. Tax write-offs? Madison asked weakly. Oh, Connor's always doing weird stuff for business, Blake explained cheerfully. Last year, he pretended to be allergic to shellfish for 3 months to get out of the Pemberton Seafood merger. The year before that, he fake-dated a supermodel to distract from the company's quarterly losses. Blake, Connor warned. What? I'm just saying fake relationships are kind of your thing, bro. But usually you give people a heads up before. Blake stopped, his eyes widening. Oh no, oh no. You didn't warn her, did you? Madison looked between the brothers, a sinking feeling in her stomach. Warn me about what? About the fact that Connor Mitchell doesn't do real relationships, Blake said, grinning wickedly. He's been engaged 4 times in the past 2 years. All fake, all for business. He's like the Taylor Swift of corporate mergers. 4 times? Madison's voice cracked. Blake, Connor snapped. What? She should know. Remember Jessica the lawyer? And then there was that senator's daughter. What was her name? Enough. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos like a sword. Both of you, sit down. We need to discuss damage control. As they settled into the living room, Madison felt like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. 30 minutes ago, she'd been worried about paying her electric bill. Now she was fake engaged to a serial fake fiancé with a mother who looked like she could run a small country, and a brother who seemed to think this was all hilarious. All right, Eleanor said, pulling out a tablet. Here's what we're going to do. The story is already trending on social media. Mitchell engagement is the #2 hashtag in New York. The stock price has gone up 3 points because investors think Connor is finally settling down. The stock went up? Connor asked, suddenly interested. Oh yes, Eleanor smiled coldly. Apparently, a stable Connor Mitchell is worth billions, which means, Miss Parker, you're now worth billions too. To us, anyway. Madison's head was spinning. I just want to go home. Home? Blake laughed. Sweetheart, you are home. You just got adopted by the Mitchell family circus. Population, 3 crazy people and whatever poor soul Connor drags into his schemes. It's not a scheme, Connor protested. It's what, Connor? Eleanor asked sweetly. Because from where I'm sitting, you just announced your engagement to a complete stranger to avoid your actual responsibilities. She's not a complete stranger, Connor said. Her name is Madison Parker. She's 25. She works as a waitress, and she's studying journalism. You know my major? Madison asked, surprised. I might have had someone run a quick background check while we were in the elevator, Connor admitted. You what? Madison shot up from the couch. That's it. I'm leaving. This is insane. You're all insane. She stormed toward the door, but Blake's voice stopped her. Madison, wait. If you leave now, what happens to your story? She turned around. What story? Blake grinned. The story about how Connor Mitchell, Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, fell head over heels for a regular girl who doesn't care about his money. Do you know how much that story is worth? Madison blinked. As a journalism student, she had to admit, it was a pretty good story. Plus, Blake added, you've got a front row seat to the Mitchell family circus. Trust me, we're way more entertaining than Netflix. Eleanor shot Blake a look that could have melted steel. What Blake is trying to say is that we have a proposition for you, Miss Parker. A proposition. 1 month, Eleanor said crisply. Play the role of Connor's loving fiancé for 1 month. Attend a few social events, smile for the cameras, convince the world that my son has finally found true love. In return, we'll pay you $50,000. Madison's jaw dropped. $50,000? Plus, Connor added, I'll give you exclusive access to the Mitchell family business. Insider information. Enough material for a dozen articles. It could launch your journalism career. Madison looked around the room, at Eleanor, who was calculating and cold, but oddly impressive, at Blake, who was grinning like this was the best entertainment he'd had in years, at Connor, who was watching her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. 1 month? She asked. 1 month, Connor confirmed. And then we stage a very public, very amicable breakup. You go back to your normal life, I go back to mine, and everyone wins. What about Victoria Ashworth? Victoria will be fine, Eleanor said dismissively. She's already moved on to the Harrison boy. Apparently she finds him less complicated. Madison took a deep breath. $50,000 would pay for her entire final year of college. Plus, the story access could be incredible for her career. And if she was being honest, the thought of spending a month with Connor Mitchell wasn't entirely unpleasant. All right, she said finally. 1 month, but I have conditions. Name them, Connor said. First, no more surprise announcements. If you're going to make me part of your life, I want to know what I'm walking into. Fair enough. Second, I want my own room, a nice one, with a lock. Done. Third, Madison looked directly at Eleanor. I want respect. I may not be from your world, but I'm not going to be treated like hired help. Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Acceptable. And finally, Madison turned to Blake. I want the truth. About everything. No more surprises about fake relationships or business arrangements or whatever other crazy stuff your family does. Blake grinned. Oh, Madison, you have no idea what you just signed up for. As if on cue, the penthouse door burst open again, and in walked a stunning woman with platinum blonde hair and a dress that probably cost more than Madison's car. Connor, darling, the woman called out. I just heard the most ridiculous rumor about you being engaged to some waitress, Eleanor sighed. And that would be Victoria Ashworth. Madison looked at Connor, who had gone pale. I thought you said she moved on. I thought she had, Connor muttered. Victoria spotted Madison and her perfect smile faltered. Oh, you're real. Unfortunately, Madison said dryly. Blake started laughing. Oh, this is going to be fun. And as Victoria began what sounded like the beginning of a very dramatic speech about betrayal and business arrangements, Madison realized that the Mitchell family circus had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. But strangely, she found herself looking forward to it. Rule number 1, Connor said, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Always maintain physical contact in public. Hand-holding, arm around the waist, that sort of thing. Madison stared at herself in the full-length mirror of her new bedroom, which, true to Connor's word, was both luxurious and equipped with a very sturdy lock. She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than her rent, shoes that felt like walking on clouds, and enough jewelry to fund a small college. Rule number 2, Connor continued, pacing behind her. We have pet names. I call you sweetheart or darling. You call me, well, whatever feels natural. How about your royal pain in the buttness? Madison suggested, turning to face him. Very funny. Rule number 3. Connor, Madison interrupted. You've been listing rules for 20 minutes. How many fake relationships have you had that you need this many rules? Connor stopped pacing and ran a hand through his hair. Look, tonight's charity gala is important. The entire New York social scene will be there, including several board members who still think I'm too young and reckless to run Mitchell Enterprises. And a fake fiancé proves you're mature? A fake fiancé proves I'm stable, settled, ready to take on more responsibility. He sat down on the edge of her bed, suddenly looking less like a confident CEO and more like a tired man carrying too much weight. My father built this company from nothing. When he died, I inherited not just a business but the livelihoods of 12,000 employees. Every decision I make affects thousands of families. Madison softened, seeing him vulnerable for the first time. That's a lot of pressure. It is. And if the board thinks I'm not ready, they could vote to replace me with someone else, someone who might not care as much about those families. So this whole fake engagement thing, it's really about protecting your employees? Connor looked up at her, surprise flickering in his blue eyes. Most people would assume it's about protecting my wealth. I'm not most people, Madison said softly. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Madison felt something shift in the air between them. Then Connor cleared his throat and stood up. Right. Well, rule number 4. A knock on the door interrupted him. Madison? Connor? Blake's voice called through the door. The car's here, and Mother is getting that look she gets when people are late. What look? Madison asked. The look that suggests she's mentally planning your funeral, Blake replied cheerfully. 20 minutes later, Madison found herself walking into the most elegant ballroom she'd ever seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from painted ceilings, and women in gowns that could have been worn to the Met Gala glided across marble floors while men in perfect tuxedos discussed what she assumed were very important business matters. Breathe, Connor murmured in her ear, his hand warm on the small of her back. You look beautiful, by the way. Despite herself, Madison felt her cheeks warm. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. Why, Miss Parker, was that almost a compliment? Before Madison could respond, they were descended upon by what felt like half the party. Connor, darling. A woman with too much plastic surgery and too many diamonds grabbed his arm. You simply must introduce us to your mysterious fiancé. And so began what Madison would later refer to as the interrogation. For the next hour, she was questioned, analyzed, and judged by everyone from senators' wives to tech moguls' daughters. Connor stayed by her side the entire time, his hand never leaving her back or waist, playing the part of the devoted fiancé perfectly. How did you two meet? Asked a woman whose name Madison had already forgotten. It was very romantic, Madison said, improvising. Connor literally swept me off my feet. Connor's mouth twitched. She has a way of making quite an entrance. And when did you know he was the one? Pressed another woman. Madison looked up at Connor, intending to give another rehearsed answer, but something in his expression made her pause. Maybe it was the way he was looking at her, like she was actually precious to him. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was the fairy tale setting. But instead of a lie, truth came tumbling out. When I realized he wasn't trying to change me, she said quietly. He saw exactly who I was and liked it anyway. The women around them sighed romantically, but Madison barely heard them. Connor was staring at her with an intensity that made her heart race. Excuse us, ladies, Connor said suddenly. I need to steal my fiancé for a dance. He led her onto the dance floor, pulling her into his arms as a slow waltz began. Madison had never waltzed in her life, but somehow, following Connor's lead felt natural. That was unexpected, Connor said softly. What was? What you said about not trying to change you. I thought we were supposed to stick to safe, generic answers. Madison felt heat creep up her neck. Sorry, I got caught up in the moment. Don't apologize. It was perfect. Very convincing. Right, convincing. Madison tried to ignore the disappointment that flashed through her chest. Of course, he thought it was just good acting. They danced in silence for a moment, and Madison became acutely aware of everything about him. The warmth of his hand on her waist, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he smelled like expensive cologne, and something uniquely him. Madison, Connor said quietly, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really agree to this? $50,000 is nice, but you could have walked away. You could have told those reporters it was all a misunderstanding. Madison considered lying, giving him some practical answer about money and career opportunities. But something about the way he was looking at her, the vulnerability she'd seen in her room earlier, made her want to be honest. Because, she said slowly, in that moment, when you asked if I wanted to play the role of the most in-love woman in the world, part of me wondered what that would feel like. Connor's steps faltered slightly. And I'm still figuring that out. Before Connor could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Victoria Ashworth had arrived, and she was making quite the entrance of her own, complete with a dramatic speech about true love and business arrangements gone wrong. Oh, for crying out loud, Connor muttered. Is she always this theatrical? Madison asked, watching Victoria gesture wildly while photographers captured every moment. Unfortunately, yes. I should probably... Connor Mitchell! Victoria's voice rang across the ballroom as she spotted them on the dance floor. How dare you humiliate me like this? The entire party turned to stare as Victoria stormed across the dance floor, her designer heels clicking ominously on the marble. Victoria, Connor said tiredly, we've discussed this. Our arrangement was purely business, yes, I know, Victoria interrupted. But that doesn't mean you can replace me with some nobody. Hey, Madison stepped forward, surprising herself with her own boldness. I may be a nobody to you, but at least I'm not throwing a tantrum in public like a spoiled child. The ballroom went dead silent. Victoria's mouth fell open. Connor's eyes widened. Did you just call me a child? Victoria sputtered. If the tiara fits, Madison replied sweetly. Blake's laughter echoed across the silent ballroom, followed by scattered chuckles from other guests. Victoria's face turned red, then purple. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Victoria hissed. I could ruin you. Maybe, Madison said calmly, but at least I'll ruin with dignity. And with that, she turned back to Connor, who was staring at her with something that looked a lot like admiration. Shall we continue our dance? She asked. As Connor pulled her back into his arms, the whispers started immediately. But instead of feeling embarrassed, Madison felt powerful. For the first time in her life, she'd stood up to someone who tried to make her feel small, and she'd won. That was incredible, Connor murmured in her ear. Was it convincing enough? Madison asked, echoing his earlier word. Connor pulled back to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her breath catch. Madison, he said softly, I'm beginning to think there's nothing fake about this at all. Before she could ask what he meant, the music swelled, and they were lost in the dance in each other's eyes, and in the growing realization that their fake relationship was starting to feel dangerously real. Across the ballroom, Eleanor Mitchell watched her son dance with his fake fiancé and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Interesting, she murmured to Blake, who had appeared at her elbow. What's interesting, Mother? Your brother hasn't looked at a woman like that since, well, ever. Blake followed her gaze and grinned. Think they know they're falling for each other? Not yet, Eleanor said. But they will. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We? Blake raised an eyebrow. Eleanor's smile turned calculating. Oh, yes, darling. I think it's time for a little family intervention. Madison woke up to the sound of someone singing off-key in what sounded like Italian opera. She checked her phone, 6:47 a.m. Who in their right mind was singing opera before 7 in the morning? She wrapped a silk robe around herself, another luxury she was still getting used to, and crept out of her room. The singing was coming from the kitchen, along with the smell of something that made her stomach growl with appreciation. Following the divine aroma, she found Blake Mitchell standing at a massive stove, wearing a kiss-the-cook apron over perfectly pressed pajamas, conducting an imaginary orchestra with a wooden spoon, while something sizzled in 3 different pans. "Blake," Madison called out, trying not to laugh. He spun around, wooden spoon still raised dramatically. "Ah, the sleeping beauty awakens. Perfect timing. I'm making my world-famous breakfast extravaganza." World famous. Well, Connor famous. And now Madison famous too, I suppose. Blake gestured grandly to the feast he was preparing. Belgian waffles, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit salad, homemade hash browns, and my secret weapon, cinnamon roll pancakes. Madison's eyes widened. "You made all this?" "Cooking is my hidden talent," Blake said proudly. "Well, one of them. I also play the violin, speak 4 languages, and can juggle flaming torches, but Mother thinks those skills are inappropriate for a Mitchell heir." Flaming torches? Don't ask. Now, coffee or fresh squeezed orange juice, or both? Definitely both. You need energy for today's adventure. "What adventure?" Madison asked, accepting a steaming mug of coffee that smelled like heaven. "Oh, you didn't know. Today is shopping day with Eleanor Mitchell. Capital S, capital D. It's like Black Friday and a military operation had a baby." Madison nearly choked on her coffee. "Shopping? With your mother? She's taking you to get a proper wardrobe for your new role as Connor's fiancée. Translation, she's going to try to turn you into a proper Mitchell woman. It's going to be..." Blake paused, searching for the right word. "Epic." Before Madison could fully process this terrifying news, Connor appeared in the doorway, looking rumpled and sleepy in a way that was far too attractive for this early in the morning. "Blake, what are you..." Connor stopped when he saw Madison, his eyes taking in her silk robe and messy hair. "Oh, good morning." "Good morning," Madison replied, suddenly very aware that she was in pajamas and probably looked like she'd been attacked by a pillow. "Morning, lovebirds," Blake chirped, completely oblivious to the awkward tension. "I was just telling Madison about her shopping expedition with Mother today." Connor's expression shifted to something between amusement and sympathy. "Ah, shopping with Mother. Madison, I should probably warn you that your mother has very strong opinions about fashion," Madison guessed. "That Mother has very strong opinions about everything," Connor corrected, "but especially about how Mitchell women should present themselves to the world." "I'm not a Mitchell woman," Madison pointed out. "I'm just pretending to be one." Connor and Blake exchanged a look that Madison couldn't quite interpret. "Right," Connor said slowly. "Pretending." An hour later, Madison found herself in the back of a limousine with Eleanor Mitchell, who was reviewing what appeared to be a military-style battle plan on her tablet. "First stop Bergdorf Goodman," Eleanor announced. "We'll need at least 3 cocktail dresses, 2 business suits, 1 formal gown, and a complete casual wardrobe. Then lunch at Le Bernardin, followed by jewelry at Tiffany's, shoes at Louboutin, and finally, a spa treatment to prepare you for tomorrow's board meeting." "Board meeting?" Madison squeaked. "Oh yes, dear, you'll be accompanying Connor to the quarterly board meeting. As his fiancé, you need to make the right impression." Eleanor's smile was sharp. "Don't worry. I'll teach you everything you need to know." The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of designer boutiques, personal shoppers, and more money being spent on clothes than Madison had ever seen in her life. Eleanor was like a general commanding her troops, pointing at dresses and suits with decisive authority, while sales associates scrambled to accommodate her every demand. "This one," Eleanor said, holding up a midnight blue cocktail dress. "It brings out your eyes. Connor will love it." "It's just for show," Madison reminded her, but she couldn't help admiring how the dress looked against her skin. "Is it?" Eleanor asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Tell me, Madison, what did you think of the charity gala last night?" Madison considered her answer carefully. "It was educational. I learned a lot about your world." "And what did you learn?" "That it's more complicated than I thought. That there's a lot of pressure to be perfect all the time. That Connor carries more responsibility than most people realize." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "Very good. And what else?" Madison hesitated, then decided on honesty. "That your son is nothing like what I expected when I first met him." "How so?" "I thought he was just another arrogant rich guy who was used to getting his way, but he's actually thoughtful and kind, and he genuinely cares about the people who work for him." Madison felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Not that it matters. This is just temporary." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, studying Madison with those sharp eyes. "You know, dear, when Connor was 12, his father took him to the company Christmas party. All the employees brought their families, and Connor spent the entire evening playing with the children, making sure everyone felt included. At the end of the night, he asked his father why some of the kids didn't have presents under the tree." Madison found herself leaning forward, drawn into the story. Charles explained that not all families could afford expensive gifts, and Connor disappeared for an hour. "We found him in his father's office, making a list of every child at the party and what they wanted for Christmas. He used his entire allowance, 3 years' worth, to buy presents for those children." Eleanor's smile was soft, proud. "He's been taking care of people ever since." "Why are you telling me this?" Madison asked quietly. "Because," Eleanor said, "I think you see him the way those children did, not as the CEO or the heir to a fortune, but as someone who genuinely wants to help." She paused. "And I think he sees you the same way." Before Madison could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "How's the shopping going? Mother hasn't traumatized you too much, has she?" Madison smiled despite herself and typed back, "Still alive. Your mother has excellent taste in torture devices." His response came immediately. "She likes you. If she didn't, she would have taken you to discount stores just to make a point. How can you tell she likes me? She's spending money on you. For Mother, that's basically a declaration of love." Madison laughed, and Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Connor?" she asked. "How did you know?" "Because you're smiling like a woman in love, dear. Which brings me to my next question. How fake is this engagement, really?" Madison's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Eleanor said, settling back in her chair, "that I've seen Connor with many women over the years. Business associates, social connections, even a few genuine attempts at dating. But I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you last night." "We barely know each other," Madison protested. "Sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes you just know." Eleanor smiled. "I knew I was going to marry Connor's father 15 minutes after I met him. He was arguing with a waiter about the wine selection, and I thought he was the most pompous man I'd ever encountered. But there was something about the way he stood up for what he believed in, even over something as silly as wine, that made me realize he was someone who would stand up for the people he loved." "What happened to him?" Madison asked softly. Eleanor's expression grew sad. "Heart attack. 3 years ago. Connor was supposed to take over the company gradually, but suddenly he was thrust into the role with no preparation. The board questioned every decision he made, waiting for him to fail. He's been trying to prove himself ever since." "Is that why he does the fake relationships? To prove he's stable?" "Partly, but also because he's afraid." Eleanor's voice grew gentle. "He watched his father work himself to death trying to take care of everyone else. Connor's terrified of letting people down, so he keeps everyone at arm's length. It's safer that way. Madison felt something shift in her chest, a deeper understanding of the man who had turned her life upside down with an accidental embrace. But you, Eleanor continued, you're different. You don't want anything from him except honesty. You